My name is Eileen Ellis. I am a full-blooded Native American. I'm a Mohawk Indian. My family hails from the Northeast. So I have family that comes from reservations outside Montreal in Canada, and also in upstate New York. So as you know from your history books, you know the Mohawks were instrumental in being part of the Iroquois Confederacy, and they were fierce warriors, but also people that were deeply connected to the mountains and the earth. So just a little bit about me, because people often ask, how did you end up doing what you do right now? And that's a really great question. So much like everybody sitting here in the room, you all come from a family background, from a lineage, from a cultural background that is a bit of a melting pot here. And for my family, my parents, which is really amazing that they're both full-blooded Native Americans, because where do you find, you know, a Native American to marry a Native American nowadays? I did, and I married a Heinz 57, but that's okay. But my parents, their families left the reservation years ago because all of the men in the family became iron workers. And you know, you've seen those iconic pictures of the iron workers that were walking the steel and, you know, doing all the building work. So they left, and here's an interesting thing about that too, because people ask me all the time, well, are you guys not afraid of heights? Because that's a common question that comes up. And that's really an urban legend. Because what happened is that for the Native Americans, when they shifted from an agricultural society into an industrial society, they had to work. And in order to make a living, and bridges and buildings started to become the mode of work, there were a lot of regular people that weren't going to do that kind of work. And there's something very interesting that happens when you're starving and there's work. You raise your hand, right? So what's interesting is they took on that work of becoming construction workers, steel workers, building bridges, building buildings, and they found that they were actually pretty good at it. And they were good at it because they had a good relationship with nature. And having a good relationship with nature gave them the confidence and the skills in order to do that work. You know, my grandfathers were iron workers. My father was an iron worker. My brothers were an iron worker. My dad tried to convince me that a woman, female, Native American welder would be a great path for me. I chose instead to go the collegiate route and have a different path. But my dad was part of that initial crew that built the Verrazano Bridge and the World Trade Center. Another interesting little thing is that when the Trade Center came down, it was my two of my brothers that were part of the ground zero that were on the demolition and the rebuild, and then another brother, two other brothers were instrumental in putting up the Freedom Tower. So we have a really interesting, you know, history with Manhattan and the buildings, and especially the Trade Center. But anyway, so my parents leave the reservation and they come to the States because that's where the work was. The tri-state area was where a lot of Native Americans ended up, and they would travel back and forth to the reservation on the weekends. My family comes from the reserve that's outside Montreal, so that's a good 6-8 hours or so from New York. And in their effort to assimilate into this melting pot, we sort of have forgotten along the way who we are. So as kids, and we grew up on Staten Island in New York, and I never lived on a reservation because my parents had permanently relocated to New York. And as a kid, being a Native American, there was always a lot of teasing. There was always a lot of, it's funny because my whole life kids were calling me Pocahontas, and it was only till the movie came out that it actually became cool to be called Pocahontas. And I'm like, oh, I wish I knew that when I was 8, you know? So there was a lot of discrimination. There was a lot, almost to the point where out of the 5 kids in my family, 2 of them never said that they were Native American. They just said they were Italian because it was just easier. But we forget who we are when we try to become one with everybody, right? I see your heads nodding, you know? And there's a gift in that, and there's also a loss in that too. So, and I tell you this because I led a very normal life, you know, grew up in Staten Island, went to 16 years of Catholic school, including college, and then joined the public school system as a social worker, which is where Joe and I have known each other. My husband was a principal down in the same district where Joe was, so we go back probably 33 years or so right now. And led a very normal life, had my children, went back to graduate school, you know, the same story that everybody else has. But then about 20 years ago, something started to speak to me. It was almost as though something was knocking at the door. And you know when you just feel restless, you know when there's just something in the wind that you feel like you have to connect into. And I've always been brought up Catholic and always been a great prayerful person and a meditator. And I just sort of asked God at that point, you know, to kind of, you know, guide that path, what was going on here. And so I serendipitously found on my desk in work one day a flyer from the Four Winds Society. And the Four Winds Society was doing a orientation for the weekend up at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. It's a beautiful training center, a spiritual center. And I thought to myself, oh, this sounds interesting. So I went into meditation, and I just sort of explored that in this meditative state. And when I went into meditation, I've always had such beautiful experiences with this, but I didn't really know what it meant. And I am journeying or traveling into this upper world. You know, Native Americans call this the middle world, the earth school. And there's a lower world and there's an upper world. Lower world is not synonymous with the Judeo-Christian idea of hell. It is a place for a Native American ideology where the lower world, everything from the past is held. Past lives, old stuff, old wounds. So I happen to journey into the upper world, and I'm greeted by my grandparents when I get up there. And there's a big party going on. What unfolds to me is the scene of a reservation, Native American reservation. And my brother, I have a brother that has passed, and my brother was there. And they had a bonfire going, and the drums were beating, and as clear as I'm sitting here talking to you is how vivid this experience was for me. And they were very excited, and I said, you know, what's everybody celebrating, you know? I'm here, but I didn't think you were going to throw a party for me visiting today. And nobody would tell me why they were so celebratory. And I thought, okay, this is interesting, because, you know, in life I've learned that life is sometimes a bit of a cookie crumb trail, and you kind of have to follow it along to see where it's going to lead you to. So anyway, I then get this the brochure, this flyer for this training. I go up because I'm thinking this is, I mean, it's about energy medicine, it's about shamanism. I'm like, okay, you know, this just seems to be right in my wheelhouse. And so I get there, and because I've been an educator for so many years, when you walk into some place, what do you automatically do? You kind of take the last row, right? You don't want to be in the front row. God bless you people that are in the front row. So I scope out my spot, and I sit in the back row so that, you know, you could be seen but not really seen, you know, that kind of a thing. And I got there early, and I sat and I went back into my meditation. And I went back into the upper world. And my grandparents greeted me again, all four of them, and they said to me, this is what we were celebrating. This is what we were celebrating, that you are taking the baton of your ancestors and stepping into doing this work. Now, I didn't even know my ancestors did this work, because remember I said we forgot who we are, you know? So I go back home after this amazing weekend, which was just so inspiring and so wonderful and so affirming that this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And I'm having this conversation with my parents who knew I was going up there, and they were like, you know what? Your great-grandmothers were healers on the reservation. I'm like, dude, why did you tell me this? For all these years, I've had this sort of really pulling and this intuitive piece, and I didn't know where it came from. And they were like, we kind of forgot. So my great-grandmothers on one side was somebody that worked with the plants on the reservation. She was the medicine woman. She did the medicinal stuff. The other grandmother was the one, if you broke your arm or were in an accident, they took her to her and she patched you up. Healers, very different aspects, but in their own right. And I thought to myself, wow. I feel like I am holding and grabbing that baton, but doing it in a very different way than what they did. And so why is that? It is because the world is so different now. Because we need people in this world that look just like you and I, that are well-spoken and intelligent. And there's no judgment to this, but I think the world needs people that can communicate some of these old practices, old spirituality, old Native American indigenous wisdom that we've gotten so far away from. You know, I say this all the time. We've made things far more complicated than they have to be, haven't we? Over and over again. You look at anything and everything is so complicated. Try buying a television. Has anybody tried to buy a television recently? Good Lord. I mean, they're all smart televisions and they're smarter than us. I have to wait till my kids come down to Florida to help us to navigate the television. That's my daughter Sarah, by the way, in the green shirt in the back. Shout out to Sarah. But we've made things so much more complicated and harder than they have to be. So I feel like I've stepped into this role, but I feel like what I do as a Native American shaman and what I do as a Native American healer has got to be practical. It can't be out there. And I love being out there. Sometimes my husband or my kids are like, you're sounding a little weird, we need to reel you back in. And I love being out there. But when you work with people and you're communicating, it's got to be practical. It's got to be something that you can use in your life from day to day. It's got to make sense. It's got to have some linear thought to it. So I finished up my tenure, if you will, in public education after almost 25 years. My husband woke up one day and said, you know, kids are all grown and everybody's leaving. You know, what do you think about retirement? I'm like, okay. So we lived in New Jersey our whole life, and we made that exodus, which took a couple of years for that to all work out. And we sold everything that we had in New Jersey, and we moved down to Fort Myers in Florida 5 years ago. And we live very happily in the Sunshine State. I come back up here once a month because I have my private practice here and I work with clients. I teach classes, I do presentations, and then I go back and I see my kids, I see my parents, and then after I've had enough of that drama for a couple of days, I get back on the plane and I go, okay, see you next month. And I have a private practice down there too. So I love doing what I do. I loved my school career. Joe and I have a billion stories of, you know, craziness and good times together. We had wonderful camaraderie. But you know when the energy is out of something, you know when you're done with something, you know when you just feel like if you don't get out of it, if you don't get out, the neighborhood's gonna kick you out because you don't belong there any longer. And I just felt like that was what was happening with my school job. Right, isn't that, I think we talked about this last year, right, Stevie?
Yeah,
I remember that ringing a bell.
You're not teaching, and I'm saying the exact same thing.
When you don't belong somewhere, the neighborhood will kick you out. So you might get fired, you might get reduced in force, you might be forced out, but at the end of the day, you don't belong there any longer. And so, or you get bought out, that's right. You get downsized, that's right. But there's always something else going on. There's always something else going on. And I say this all the time. Okay, you might be angry and heartbroken and bitter that you lost your job, but if the universe did not orchestrate for you to get out of that job, how would you have been available 6 months from now for something else in your life that would have been more opportunity, more healing for you, maybe even more money or more adventure? Because we get very complacent, don't we? Oh, we love our sweatpants and our slippers, don't we? We love to just be cozy and comfortable. And I'm not saying it looks good, and I'm not saying it's healthy, but we love to just be in our zone. And so sometimes the neighborhood kicks us out because we don't belong there, because Spirit, God, the universe has other plans for us. And we have to respect that along the way. You know, you have your pity party for a couple of days. The great Carolyn Mace, a spiritual teacher, says, and I use this all the time, but I credit her, she says that when something happens, that you should bear your wound only 3 times. Find the 3 people or groups of people that you trust, that you feel in communion with, and you bear your wound 3 times, but after that, let it go. After that, let it go. So you can have your pity party. You know, I say that to my kids all the time. Right, cry about it, you know, kick and scream and moan. But then after a while, okay, something else is coming. So, Native Americans tell a lot of stories, so I'm already going to apologize on the upfront for the stories because it takes me off on a tangent, but it all leads back to the same place anyway. But stories are fun, aren't they? You know, we learn from stories. So we relocate to Florida. I come back and forth. I do this work, and my parents, my family couldn't be prouder of me. And I will tell you that stepping into this work. And interesting too, because even when I started my training, I was a public school employee. And I remember going to my superintendent. I was a director of special ed. You know, that's probably besides the transportation coordinator, the craziest job in the school district. And I remember going to him, and he knew that I was a Native American, and he knew that I was an intuitive person. And I remember having this conversation like, and as Joe knows, this was not an easy, you know, warm and fuzzy man. And I said to him, you know, I want to do this training, but I have to be gone in September. Is there a worse month to be out of the school district as an administrator than September? And then I have to leave again in April, which is state testing, which is also another, you know, hard time to be away. And if I'm going to make a commitment to this training, I got to do this for like 2 or 3 years. And he turned to me and he said, go, do it. If this is what speaks to you, do it. We'll get you covered. We'll do whatever we need to get things covered. And so I go to my parents and I'm like, oh, you know, I've had my kids and, you know, my husband's great. He's wonderful. But he can't do hair, you know, when the kids have to go to school and, you know, he wasn't really good at, you know, matching the clothes and the hair. And whenever I was away, people would be like, you were away, right, weren't you? Ray was in charge. So I go to my parents and my parents were like, you know, we'll do whatever we need to do. And so here's my point. When you have the courage to answer whatever's knocking at your door, somehow the stars align and all the things come into place. Come in, have a seat. And all the things happen and line up to support what it is that you're being called into. I have this little magnet on my refrigerator that's been on my refrigerator for 10 years. And it's that beautiful Zen saying, leap and the net will appear. And when I first got it 10 years ago, they all looked at me like, what? And yet, that's an adage that I live by. Leap and the net will appear. You know, it will happen. It will happen. A little bit of faith, a little bit of naivety. Yeah, I can't say that. But you know what I mean. So anyway, so that's my background story. I was an administrator. I do this work now. I have this private practice. And I just love talking and teaching. And I love when I can see how what I say resonates in your life. I love that look on your face when all of a sudden that light goes on too and it makes sense to you. No sweat with the phones. I love when phones ring. It's like God answering, you know, affirming what we're talking about. Not an issue. And also, if you need to use the ladies' room or the men's room, please feel free to go. That's fine. So that's background. So let's talk about this Native American stuff. Yeah. You know, it's really cool right now to be a Native American. 50 years ago, we were the bad guys, right? When the Cowboys and the Indians movie came. You know, my father is such a huge John Wayne fan. I'm like, Dad, you know? Do you get it? He hated the Indians. But he was a man's man. And my father was an iron worker and a foreman, so, you know, that archetype rung very strong with him. So it's really cool to be a Native American because everybody thinks, wow, that's really interesting. You know, when it, you know, I don't wear it on my sleeve, but, you know, people will say, you know, what are you? You know, you not sure if you're Italian or if you're, you know, Asian a little bit, you know what?
Egyptian.
Or Egyptian. I've not heard that one. Okay. But, you know.
There's two of them here.
Okay. We're sisters. I could pass. I feel like one of those chameleons. I could pass for a bunch of different things. So, what was I saying? There's what
We were
happened.
asking
The Westerns.
Native Americans being in
John Wayne.
Oh yeah, okay, the John Wayne, yeah, the John Wayne, the Native Americans. So, it's really cool to be a Native American. It's cool to talk about it, and it's cool to share these stories. So once upon a time, and this is probably the best way that I could succinctly describe our spirituality. Once upon a time, the Native Americans and the indigenous people roamed, you know, the world, the planet. And then the missionaries and the conquistadors came to the Americas, and they met these odd-looking people, and they handed them a Bible, and they said, "This is the Word of God." And the Native Americans took that Bible, that book, and they held it up to their ear, and they said, "We don't hear your God in this thing that you handed us, but we hear God in the river, in the land, in the trees, in the flowers, in the sun." And although Native Americans have over so many eons of time gotten a bad rap about being paganistic and, earth worshippers, the truth of the matter is that they see God in everything. That energy, that essence, that divine light is in everything. And everything, therefore, becomes sacred. We're like a little hologram. Remember those little holograms that, you had a picture, and if you tilted the hologram, you could see something little in it, but then if you tilted it another way? We're like holograms. We are part of the universe, but the whole universe is inside of us too. And so Native Americans have that ideology, that spirituality, that everything is sacred. So therefore, the goal for Native Americans was to live in right reciprocity. And I use this word frequently. It's called Ayni, A-Y-N-I. And Ayni is a Native American word that refers to this. It's about living in right reciprocity. It's bigger than balance. We use that word balance a lot, but what does balance mean? I get this dancing bear, holding balls when I think about balance. It's really about living in right reciprocity with yourself, with the earth, with each other, so that any fans of the movie Avatar, when Avatar came out, any fans, that was a wonderful, great movie, right? About Native people, indigenous people. So they would, and I cried when I saw this movie because I so got it. But before they would hunt an animal, they would look into that animal's eyes and they would say, "Thank you for giving of your life so that the tribe could be sustained." There was such a beautiful, again, reciprocity of energy between all living things. And guess what? Everything vibrates with energy. Everything that we see vibrates with energy. So fast forward to this time now, where how do we treat the earth? How do we treat each other? My goodness, turn on the news, right? It is horrific what we do to each other over whose God is the right God, over who's right, who's left, who's wrong. It is just our own politics right now is vibrating with a lot of that craziness. So the message, I believe, that has gotten so construed is about coming back into right reciprocity with ourselves, coming back into right reciprocity with the earth, with all things. Now, look, the Native Americans call this Earth School the hardest place to be in. They actually believe that there is no, hit this mic with mine. I'm gonna have lip gloss all over your mic, sorry. The Native Americans believe that there is no hellish afterlife, that this is the hard place here, the Earth School, that this is where the trials and the tribulations and the hard work. Anybody that's raised kids, knows this is the trials, right?
Right.
This is the hard place. So the Native Americans believe that, like all dogs go to heaven, all people are going to go to heaven. Because if you can get through this, doing as best as you can, now you might not get into the penthouse suite in heaven when you get there. You might have to start in the basement and work your way up. But they really do believe, and I think that the longer I am on this Earth School, the more I believe that. Because I hear people's stories, and I listen to what they've been through and what their parents have been through. When you listen to the path that your parents and your grandparents walked in order for you to be able to sit here today, is amazing, is absolutely phenomenal. So the Native Americans believe that this Earth School is the hard place. And another thing about Native American spirituality is this. They have much more of a feminine tradition when they look at spirituality. Whereas organized religion, and believe me, I love organized religion. I am just as home on the beach as I am in an ashram or a synagogue or a church. God is everywhere, and I love being in any place that worships that divine light. But for the Native Americans, it's more of a feminine tradition rather than a masculine tradition. And it is more of a horizontal tradition than a vertical tradition. So let me explain. So for organized religion, people are sort of down here, and if you want to, make some progress, you have to kind of go through your priest. I'm just using Catholic because that's what I was raised. And then you kind of have to go through your cardinal or your bishop or what, until you kind of get to the Pope, right? The Pope is the big guy. And then on top of the Pope is God. And the belief is that eventually we're going to make our way through this and we'll find eternal life. But the Native Americans are like, listen, dude, if you want to connect with God, God's in everything. Why don't you just sit in meditation tonight and sit and meet with God? And so it's more of a feminine, a horizontal tradition, because you don't have to go through anybody to connect in with God. Now, I was raised Catholic, and, I would say to the nuns at school, what do you mean? The babies die and they go to purgatory. There was all those questions and I'm not anti-Catholic, I love the Catholics. But some of that stuff just didn't make sense to me, and I was always that kind of inquisitive smart kid, or maybe smart aleck kid, maybe, that had questions that didn't have any answers. But when I heard this, I thought, you know what? I want to hang out with God tonight. I want to just be in meditation and have that experience and have that connection to that divine light, whatever you want to call that. So it's a very different ideology. And I don't think anything is right or wrong.
How do you do it?
How do you do it?
Yeah.
We'll get to that. Yeah. Stay tuned. I'll have you stay in your seat for a little while longer. So far so good. Any questions? Because this is a conversation, and I really do welcome your thoughts or your input. If something makes sense, say, yeah, that makes sense. If something doesn't make sense, feel free. I think that we can be kind of informal about this. So any thoughts at this point? Any questions? Anything that's rattling around in your head?
So you said that it's cool to be Native Indian these days. Are you saying that there isn't any discrimination against them anymore?
That's a great question.
What was the question?
The question was, I said that it's really cool to be a Native American, but isn't there still discrimination against the Native Americans? That's a great question. I can only tell you my perspective. Because I have done so much training in this field, in becoming and evolving into the shaman that I am, the practitioner, that I've had to walk my own medicine path, my medicine wheel. I've had to release all of those old wounds, all of those old things that were vibrating in me, all of the feelings of discrimination when I was a kid. And so I am in a place right now where I am really pretty neutral, and I don't vibrate with that level of anger. Now my parents, on the other hand, and my daughter will attest to this, tend to be very, I hope I'm not offending anybody, Fox News, right-wing Republican, Trump is our man, and we hate minorities. But they're Native Americans. So I'm very different than they are. Now my sister, who was born and raised in the same family, knows nothing about energy or shamanism. So I don't know that it's necessarily from where you came from, but what kind of work you have done for yourself along the way to evolve into a healthier, happier human being. So that kind of stuff doesn't bother me. I just think that, we have this saying that everybody's in a different level of spirit school. So when I was a school administrator, I would meet these amazing, little kindergartners sometimes that were just so an old soul when you see an old soul. There's just something in their eyes, and there's just a wisdom about them. And I would say, well, this little kid is a graduate student in spirit school. And I'd meet an old person who was cranky, who you would think, and I'm thinking that he's more like a kindergartner in spirit school. So when you started looking at it through a different lens, you can kind of give people a pass. If they're only in kindergarten level and spirit school, then how can you expect them to be, more evolved? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, when you said that you meditated the first time and there was a celebration in the upper world, and then the second time you realized what the celebration was about, they told you. What does that say to you about the nature of foreknowledge of events?
Great question. So we live in a very linear time world here in the Earth School, right? It moves one way. And we go by our watch, we go by our clocks. But when you step outside of ordinary or linear time, everything's happening at the same time. So what I didn't tell you is that when I went up to Omega, when I had the meditation, I did not even know that brochure was coming on my desk. I didn't know that was in my destiny, my pathway. And so 6 months later, I'm sitting there, and I kind of half forgot about that meditation until they reminded me. So they had already known outside of this ordinary linear time that I was going to do that. But here's the thing. Your greatest asset as a human being is your free will. Your greatest liability as a human being is your free will, right? Can you see that in your own life? So yes, there are many, many different, what I'm going to call lifelines, paths that you can take. But it's your free will to choose to walk that path. So somehow, some way, my ancestors knew that I was going to choose that path and walk that way. So that's the difference between linear time and when there's no time. And it's really cool to be in a place where there's no time in that meditation that we'll talk about that. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool, right?
Yes.
Cool. I know we have one back here.
Oh, I'm part Cherokee.
Ah, hello, sister.
Native American. And I understand what you're saying. Now I walk in my spiritual world, live in my spiritual world, in the physical world, because that's a part of me. And I didn't understand when it first happened to me because I was way up here and I'm like, oh, where am I? What am I doing? But it was like astral travel.
Astral travel. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Then I seen a lot of things. So when I came back down, now I put a garden in my front yard. My ancestors did. I grew some of my own food. I am at peace with myself. I'm at peace with even my enemies and associates of people around me. So it makes me have a better peace of mind.
That's right.
When I had to forgive my enemies and
That's right.
people that throwing that evil thing,
That's right.
that bird or whatever. So now I'm at peace with myself, and I'm more in touch with the spirit of God or the universe or whatever that you want to call it, the plane. So
May I paraphrase what you just said? So I know that you can't always hear it on the side of the room. So this beautiful woman has Native American ancestry, and she's saying that in her own meditation or astral travels, she has seen things and experienced things that she has brought back into this middle world that has shifted her life and how she looks at things, and realizes that she has gained from that experience a deep sense of peace. And I'm going to also say, if you don't mind, a oneness, that we're all connected, you know?
yeah. And the healing.
And the healing,
Yeah.
yeah, and all of the sort of healing energy that was derived from that. Now, I know sometimes it sounds like I'm talking, foreign language, because we live in a very, very linear Earth school here, don't we? We're very, very cause and effect. And so when we start talking about these things, the astral traveling, meditation, being downloaded with information, that's not really something that is a familiar conversation. But I'm going to tell you, you're all sitting here for a reason. And for whatever reason has called you here today, there's something in this conversation today that you know and that you understand. You've just forgotten. Your cell memory holds all of this, because guess what? We all came from the earth. Once upon a time, we all came from indigenous people. We've just forgotten who we are. And so this process of having this conversation, in a lot of ways, is helping you to remember, two ways, not only memory, but to remember yourself back into your tribe, back into the connectedness. Does that kind of paraphrase what you're saying? Yeah, right on, exactly. Yeah, and it's just a lovely experience. The challenge is, and I'm going to tell you this only because I'm pretty good about having one foot in the spirit world and one foot here in the middle world. Sometimes I'd rather have 2 feet here, but I can't, you know. So you have to find a way to communicate what you believe to be true and not sound like a complete flake. You know, I mean, you laugh, but it's true.
Yeah.
I'm the sanest person I know. I mean, I have a master's degree in social work. I lived a very linear, logical life with a budget in a school district with, you know, crazy kids, screaming parents, you know. I get it. I know. I have children. I have grandchildren. Along the way, I've lost a brother to a heroin overdose. We lost our oldest son to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma a couple of years ago. I get it. I know how hard it is to be here, but I also know, as you just said, that if you stand here all the time, life is hard. When you find a way to find that, again, I'm going to use that word Eileen, that sense of right reciprocity, you realize that all of the craziness that you see, this too shall pass.
Yes.
It's going to pass.
Yes.
And here's the thing, we are here to learn lessons. It's to evolve our soul. I say this to my clients all the time. If nothing else, get this right in this lifetime, because do you want to come back and do this all over again? Hell no, right? No. And I'm not saying that once you kind of work through your personal stuff that life is rainbows and crystals. However, your capacity to plow through, it's like a hot knife through butter, in the things that normally would have debilitated you or would have overwhelmed you, become okay. You can manage it better. In the same way that your body, when you have exercise, develops physical muscle, as you find this balancing act here with understanding this spiritual stuff, you develop spiritual muscle. And your spiritual muscle is, in a lot of ways, a lot more important than your physical muscle, because life here is tough. And life throws its challenges, its craziness, its deaths, its divorces, its accidents, its disasters right in your face. So having the spiritual muscle is about what this is about. So you're sitting here listening to this because something is inspiring you and downloading into you some resonance of what you probably already know to be true on some level, but not exactly. Thoughts, questions? Yes?
I was wondering,
Excellent, yeah, thank
I
you.
was wondering if you ever, I was wondering if you ever questioned your religious beliefs, because like I'm still having a trouble time like really figuring out what my beliefs are. I'm trying to figure out all different sets of beliefs and seeing. I go to this church, so I have a lot of different beliefs around me, and I was wondering like if you were like that when you were young.
I can only speak about my journey and my experience. I was raised Catholic, and we went to church every Sunday in the station wagon, and everybody got dressed up, and everybody plowed into the car, and you know, and I went to Catholic schools. So I was very, very entrenched in the Catholic religion. I don't want to say this, but I didn't know any better. I mean, that's what you're taught. That's what you believe to be true. Although as I got older, I started like wondering about some of the stuff. I think there's a process that we go through which you have to be exposed to those, a strong foundation. And then you sort of have that free will to see what fits for you, what works for you. And then we sort of search out things or people that are more like us or communities that are like us that believe the same things that we believe. But here's the thing. There are so many paths to God, to Great Spirit. None of them are wrong. But you got to find out what fits for you. And at the end of the day, anything that does not put love first is not a path to God, you know? And God, the Great Spirit, is about love and light. And anything that is not love and light is not a pathway to that. So feel free with exploring and feel free with questioning And at the end of the day, as you grow up, then you can pick and choose what works for you, what feels right for you. And here's the thing, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, there's a lot of things in the Catholic faith that I'm like, yeah, all right. But you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I love sitting in the church. I love the songs. My kids laugh at me because I know all the words, when to stand up, when to sit, and all that. I love being in there. I don't agree with everything, but I love, there's so many gems to pull out of these religious traditions. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So explore, have fun with it. I think there was one other question. Go ahead. We have a microphone for you.
All right, this is sort of, what?
Yeah.
Talk right into it.
Now get your lipstick on it.
That you're a healer, and we're talking about spiritual healing, and I tend to think of illness, disease, all these conditions, to me are some kind of initiation, let's say, into a spiritual transformation. Okay. I know everybody doesn't see it that way because the allopathic world is,
That's right.
let's give them a pill,
That's
let's treat this, let's do
Right.
this, let's do that. So you agree with that, right? That I just think there's a spiritual component. So my question is, what is your feeling about the disease Alzheimer's? What is that? I mean, I heard somebody say this once and it really resonated with me.
Hold that thought. What you heard, and let me tell you what I think first.
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So yeah, Alzheimer's, a lot of talk about that right now. And we're gonna, after I answer your question, we're gonna segue into energy medicine because that's fascinating to people. Like, what is that, right? What's energy medicine? What's shamanism? How does that help all of these things that we're talking about in terms of your physical body, right? But I have this sort of inclination that, well, I know this to be true. When people are diagnosed and dealing with Alzheimer's, they literally have 1 foot in the world of spirit already, and they have 1 foot left here in the earth school. They are actually transitioning into that world of spirit, because oftentimes you will see them having conversations with, what we don't think people exist, but they're having conversations with their loved ones, with their angels. And it's a painful process for us to see and to watch. But when I see people that are dealing with Alzheimer's, there's a part of me that's a little bit of a silent cheer, because when they're in that space and time, they are really being held in the palm of God's hand. They're with their loved ones, even if it's just part-time. But, I believe that that's that disconnect. Other people talk about the brain and the implications neurologically speaking, and I'm sure there's a basis to all of that. But from a spiritual perspective, and I've worked in hospice, and I've worked with, Alzheimer's patients and whatnot, they're there, but they're not there. They're there, but they're not there. And when they're not there, they're happy to not be there. How many people have had near-death experiences like, I can't believe I had to go back, They don't want to come back. They want to stay on the other side. It is rainbows and crystals on the other side, when you experience that light. I've had several near-death experiences in my lifetime. So let's talk about this healing stuff, this energy medicine. Let's talk about how that dovetails with shamanism. Anybody know anything about energy medicine in the room? A little bit? Okay. All right. A little bit? Yeah, okay.
Did you want to say more when you were?
No, go ahead. No,
Give me your answer though.
no, well, that.
I'm sorry, Steve, you're right.
That's okay. That a person who can't work things out in their right mind has to get into their not right mind in order to, I don't know whether it's assimilate, whatever the experience is, to make the transition, that it's something they have to do.
Perhaps.
And I think Alzheimer's is harder on the family.
Oh, absolutely.
It's
Caretakers.
a gradual grieving that takes place.
Agreed.
Anyway, so that's.
Agreed.
But I just wondered what your.
And I know Bessie's talking from personal.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I work with people that end of life, so.
Right.
It's
Agreed.
yeah.
There's a spiritual implication to everything, to every diagnosis, to every disease, and we tend to not look at it through that eyes, because you're right, allopathic medicine is always looking for a cure. A cure is basically amelioration of symptoms. But if you're looking for a healing, well, that's a different story, And so let's talk about that. There's a difference between curing and healing. And we use them interchangeably, but they're really not, necessarily interchangeable. So a curing is to be disease-free in your body. It's to have no symptoms. And, Western medicine, that's their goal, is to cure you. From a shamanic perspective, or an energy medicine perspective, a cure is great. But I'm more concerned about you being healed. Because something was way out of balance in your body that created the environment for this heavy energy to crystallize into something that landed in one of your organs or in your body or in your bloodstream. And if we want to work with healing, we have to find out where that came from. We have to heal that. We have to pull that heavy or toxic energy out of people's body and replace it with light. Now, that said, there's no defeat and there's no defeat in illness and death. Let me just say that up front. We're all gonna die.
Yes.
Nobody's getting out of this lifetime alive. Every day you wake up, you're dying a little bit more. You're living, but you're dying. That's the paradox of life. And let me also interject at this time a little bit about soul contracts. Because I think that disease and death get a really bad rap sometimes. Because some people come into this lifetime, this incarnation, with a soul contract that says, I'm only supposed to be here for 5 years. And after that 5 years, I'm going to go back into the upper world. And my goal, my mission, my soul contract is to teach these people, these souls masquerading around as my parents, and the people around them, the lesson of unconditional love. And I know this may sound crazy, but we agree to these soul contracts. We don't remember. If we remembered, we'd want to come down here and do all this, right? But we agree to these soul contracts, so we have to play those things out. And so sometimes people are diagnosed, children are diagnosed with cancer or diseases. Sometimes they're fulfilling a soul contract they agreed to, and they're only supposed to be here for a certain time. Now, does that mean that we don't treat them, don't take care of them? Absolutely not. We give them every opportunity. But when I work with people who are ill, or their children that are ill, sometimes I see their soul contracts really clearly. Just because it's the gift that I have, I can see into the invisible world of spirit. And I know that they're not supposed to be here. I know they're only supposed to be here for a short period of time. And then it becomes our stewardship to allow that to unfold, to allow them to fulfill their contract. I already said, up front that our oldest son died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. 27 years old, never sick a day in his life, not even a cavity in his mouth. And he wakes up sick one day. And long story short, we bring him, he was my husband's oldest son, my stepson, and goes to the hospital and, Columbia Presbyterian, we take him up to that. And he's diagnosed with stage 4, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Like, what happened to 1, 2, and 3? And where were the signs and symbols along the way, right? And I bring this up because I think this is a real teachable moment. Because it defies gravity. Like, okay, how does this make any sense, right? And you all have people in your life that this story will resonate with. Everybody knows somebody that something happens out of the blue and you think, holy crap, what just happened here? So, we take him, and Spirit along the way is telling me that this is really serious. And I'm going to tell you something, that before he was diagnosed, I was sitting out, we lived in Point Pleasant, and I'm sitting out by my pool, and I literally felt like something was coming. You know that weird, ominous feeling that you get once in a while? Most of the time, if you're in a dark alley and all of a sudden, you get that weird feeling. When the hair goes back up on your the hair on your back goes up on your arms. I get this really weird feeling that something was coming. It reminds me of West Side Story, that song. Something's coming, right? There's real wisdom in that song. If you're paying attention, you're often given messages like this. And I didn't know what that meant, but I felt in every fiber of my body that there was a storm coming. And I felt like it was Spirit, God's, universe way of saying, put on your seatbelt because there's a storm coming. And I didn't even know what that meant, but I sort of started to emotionally and mentally and spiritually prepare myself. Because prior to this, 2 years ago, my brother had died of a heroin overdose. And before he died of a heroin overdose, I had a vision from Spirit that I was standing on one of those, those old wooden sailboats, from the, 18th century or so, and they had that big giant wheel, I want to call it a steering wheel. Somebody help me out. What's it called? It's not a steering wheel, right? You know what I mean. And Spirit showed me standing at that wheel, and the boat was heading in towards rough waters. And the message that I derived from that dream was that my family was heading into rough waters, but I could steer the boat. I could help them with that. And not to get caught in the story, but hold on tight to the wheel. So I had that experience, many times before. So anyway, I have this vision, this feeling that something's coming, and then 2 months later he's diagnosed with this. And we went through chemo, 3 different rounds of chemo, and a stem cell transplant, which in and of itself is horrendous up at Hackensack, and then radiation. But in July of that summer, Spirit came to me and said, he's not going to survive this. We're giving you the heads up that he's not going to survive this. And I will tell you that the hardest conversation I've ever had to have with my husband was to sit down and tell him that Matthew was not going to survive this. He was his only son, the firstborn, adored him. They were very connected. And he knows what I do, so he respects what I do. And his first comment was, maybe you got your lines crossed, maybe, it was kind of funny at the time and a little bit funny, but not funny, but maybe you're getting the message mixed up with somebody else. Like maybe, and I said, no. Here's the thing. Great Spirit is telling me this because I'm going to be helped in doing this. And then I am literally going to stand behind you, and that's going to help you do this. And you are going to stand behind Matthew, and that's how the energy is going to flow. Our job is to midwife him to the other side, because he's not meant to be here. His soul contract is just about up. Now, we're standing at a time when we could do all kinds of different rounds of chemo. Nobody said it was done. But that July 21st, I realized that I was given the heads up that this wasn't going to turn out the way we wanted to. So I'm going to tell you that anticipatory grief is probably even more potent and powerful than actual when something happens, because you know something is going to happen. And yet you're playing the game and you're supporting and doing whatnot. And all the way along, Matthew's kind of kicking and screaming about this. He wasn't a spiritual person. He wasn't a religious person. He wanted the treatments, but he didn't want the treatments, and he hated being sick, and blah blah blah. So he's really wrestling with this, and I said to my husband, I feel like I need to help him, but I can't have a conversation with him. So here's the astral plane that you were talking about, example. So I go to sleep one night, and the next day he was going to be in Riverview for a chemo treatment, and we had to be there at 10 o'clock. It was an inpatient. And so, when you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you realize that you don't have to wake up yet, and you're like, oh, I can go back to sleep for another hour or two. It was too early. And so I fell back asleep. And when I fell back asleep, I had this amazing conversation with Matthew's spirit or soul on what we call this astral plane. And I am like, Matthew, what's going on here? What's the problem? Why are you having such a hard time with this? We both kind of know how this is going to turn out. And he said to me, I'll never forget this, he said to me, I'm okay with fulfilling, with leaving, but I feel like I'm going to break my mother and my father's heart when I do this, and I don't want to leave because of them. Ah, ding, ding, ding. Ah. So I say to him on the astral plane, listen, I know what's going on, and Daddy knows what's going on already. We already know. I promise to you that when this is said and done, I will have a conversation with your mother and your stepfather so that they will know and understand that it had nothing to do with you, how you were raised, what you ate, nothing to do with that. But I promise you that we will be okay, because Daddy and I are on this already. We know this. And he just looked at me with a sense of peace on the astral plane. And that vision, that dream had gone away. So, I wake up from that, it's the second time I wake up, and I tell this to my husband. I'm like, Eureka! I think we made some progress here. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I explained this to him, and I said, I think that that he's sort of more at peace with this. So, my husband looked at me with like the one eye. So we go to the hospital, and we're standing there, and it's like, hey Matt, how you doing? How'd you sleep last night? He said, well, I swear to God, right hand, true story. He says, well, I was very restless, and I woke up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I realized I could go back to sleep. So I went back to sleep, and I had an amazing dream. And when I woke up from the dream, I felt peaceful about this. And I'll do whatever I need to do right now. Well, my husband, like, if your head could whip off your shoulders and look at me, and I just looked at him and I smiled. And that's the power of this work. Did he get a cure? No. But did he die in a healed state? Absolutely. Absolutely. I've worked with many, many cancer patients. And the beauty of those souls is that they don't get a cure, but they die in a beautiful healed state. So there's a big difference between curing and healing. And believe me, I'll take a cure any day. I'm no different than you are, But at the same time, I'll gladly welcome the healing and a curing, if that's possible. So any thoughts about that? Or anybody's other life stories that might mirror that, or, yeah.
I have so many of them, so.
Just give us a little taste, because we have to keep an eye on the clock here.
I have young,
There's a microphone.
I have a young niece,
What?
and she was dying of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah,
And
and
I
for
knew-
our whole meeting, but
And
like for
out of everybody at the table, it was family
20 more? Before?
thing.
Okay.
She walks up behind me.
Give people a chance.
I don't hear her. She puts her hands on my back to let me know.
Mm-hmm.
So her mother said, come over here, come over here and eat. So the little girl went to my plate and took something and put it in her mouth. She said, I ate. But she was trying to let me know.
That's right.
Tell her mother to leave
Yeah,
her alone.
right.
Let her go.
She knows that you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she knew I knew.
Yeah. Our souls know a lot.
And I had so many of these until it was frightening. Till I talked to my sister, my older sister, before she passed. And she said, you just need to pray. Every time I turn around, you're talking about somebody's gonna die, and you feel it, you see it. But I was seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
I was feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
If I went to sleep and I dreamt it, I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I would call and say, I know that somebody's getting ready to leave the world. I don't want to hear it. I'm sick of you. You need to go pray.
It's a little daunting, We have to admit when we say
But I had to. I thought that she was very religious. I thought I could hear it with her. She said, I don't want to hear it. I know what you're gonna say, but you just need to go pray. You need to go pray this off. So I prayed, and I stopped having so many of them. But believe me, they still come.
Yeah. We're all intuitive. We just don't. We have different levels of
Yeah.
intuitiveness.
We
We're all
all have that
multisensory.
insight, but
Yeah.
sometimes we close the
That's
shade.
right. And sometimes, honestly, if you're getting those hits on information that you don't want, you just ask your guides to not show you things that you don't have any influence over. Because that'll happen to me sometimes. I'll get, visions of, I'm like, what are you showing me this for? What, I can't do anything about that, so sometimes it's just a matter of having a communication with you and your guides and your God and saying, I will honor the gift you've given me, but, if I can do something about it, give me the heads up. If I can't, then I don't want to be burdened with it, yeah. And not everybody wants to hear this conversation either, if we went out into the street right now and said we were talking about this, they'd be looking at us like we had 3 heads. So, I get that. So let's talk about energy medicine, because this is like a fascinating thing. Give me a
Eileen,
little-
I just want to interject, because
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
terrible at linear time. I failed the linear time course. So, yeah? Oh, no, because it just has to do with time.
What time do we have to finish?
Well, I'm suggesting that we finish this part in like 20 minutes.
You got it.
And then we'll have more casual time to have some
Absolutely.
snacks and-
Perfect.
Does that sound good to everybody?
Perfect, 20 minutes, you got it?
All right.
Okay, yep. What's that?
She wants more.
You want more?
Yeah, I do too. That's why I fail at this. I'm not.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, it really is. And especially when it's like, everybody's had these experiences, and you think, am I nuts that I'm having these dreams or these dreams? You're not. But we just don't ever talk about it. We don't ever, deal with it. Anyway, so energy medicine, there are many, many different forms of energy medicine. So people will talk about doing energy medicine, and some of them are focused in on the physical body, picking up on energies in your body. Some people are medical intuitive, so they can see disease in your body. That's another type of energy medicine. There is energy medicine that involves just your energy body, which is your 7 energy centers, your chakras that are around your body. And then there's another form of energy medicine called shamanism. And I am trained and I am gifted in that form of energy medicine, which is shamanism. So what that means is this. You have a physical body that you're sitting in, and you have an energy body around that physical body. We've known for thousands of years, all the Native Americans understood this, but they didn't have quite the language to explain what this was about. But your energy body has 7 energy centers that are about 6 inches from your physical body. And some people describe that as like your aura, the light that's around you. You've heard that before. Your energy body, or your 7 energy centers, have a specific function for each part of your body. I live in Southwest Florida. If you do not change your air conditioning filters every month, what will happen to your air conditioning system? Thank you. It will break down. And what is that translated to? It won't work, it will stop, it will die on you. Your energy centers, or your chakras, are like air filters in your air conditioning system. If you don't clean them out from time to time, they are going to not allow energy to flow within your body, your energy body. Your chakras, or your energy body, influences your physical body. So here's the beauty of your energy center. If energy is coming into you, and when I say energy, this is what I mean, translation, emotional stuff. The street currency for energy is your emotional stuff. So somebody tells you something that shocks you or harms you. A great example of this is this, because I had a client yesterday that was talking about this with me. So somebody said something to this woman, and she was so disappointed by what was said to her, really felt wounded. You ever get that punched in the gut feeling? You know what I'm talking about? Where you feel like the wind was knocked out of you? Her solar plexus chakra, or energy center, accepted in this blow, if you will, what somebody said to her, and it so shocked her and upset her that it created this heavy energy in her energy center, and she wasn't able to process that. And so what I do, the work that I do, is I track energy. That's what this comes down to. I track energy. I can feel it, I can see it. So there are 2 types of energy. There is light energy, which vibrates up here, and it's based in love. There's many, many faces of this. This is love, hope, joy, all of those things that are positive. And then there's the other form of energy, which is heavy. And heavy energy vibrates down here. Heavy energy is based in the emotion of fear. Fear has many faces, doesn't it? Anger, sorrow, grief, unworthiness, shame, humiliation. And even as I say that, you know how heavy you feel when you're, how about another thing? Don't you know when you're in the company of somebody that's vibrating with light energy versus heavy energy?
Yes.
Do they not suck the life out of you? Is it just not like, oh my God, not fun? When you walk into a room, can you not feel the energy in the room, whether it's light energy or heavy energy? If you're at a party where you don't belong, you're gonna know that before anybody says one word to you. So this process of energy tracking is what everybody does, but I'm just really good at it, so I can pick up on this energy. So what I do with my clients is I listen to what their story is, and I'm thinking about this light and this heavy energy. So there's heavy energy lying in their energy body that's influencing their physical body, because oftentimes they'll come to me because something is wrong. They're sick, they're ill, or they're in emotional distress, which is, just another variation of that. And I track that energy. Where's that energy living in their body? And so I will measure their 7 energy centers. I will see where the heavy energy is in their body. And I will literally extract it out of their physical body and replace it with light. This work is where magic meets miracles. And I've been doing this for years and years with thousands of people. I don't know how exactly this works, because if you ask me a linear explanation, I couldn't give it to you. But there's something about 3 variables when you show up. Intention, you gotta wanna be healed, you gotta wanna do the work. Gratitude, you have to say thank you, thank you, thank you for everything in your life. And I'm talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly stuff. Everything in your life that has happened has brought you to this point of learning something that you need to learn about yourself. And the third thing that you have to have if you want to come to this party is you got to practice forgiveness. And I'm going to tell you, the hardest person to forgive over and over again is yourself. The hardest person to forgive is yourself. So if you show up with intention, gratitude, and forgiveness, I guarantee you that this will be very powerful for you. If you believe in none of this, which a lot of people have come to me and said, I don't believe in anything you do, but you know what, I tried everything, what the heck, right? Okay, I'll be default, I don't care, because obviously Great Spirit is sent to me for something. And even those that don't even believe it, all of a sudden say, I don't know what you just did, but I feel better, I feel lighter. This process of pulling out heavy energy, which is based in fear, and replacing it with light energy, is what the shamanistic perspective of energy medicine is about. Crazy, right? But maybe not so crazy, right? I do this. So many things have happened in my own family. My dad is like a cat with 9 lives and has had a lot of heart issues. And again, remember I told you he's the Republican, Fox News. But he understands this, he gets this. But he's like a little leery about me ever like working with him. So I work with people remotely. You don't even have to be there in person for me. I can literally call your energy body to my house in Florida where I work. And I have this doll. It's not a creepy doll. My kids are always asking me that. It's not a creepy doll, not a chunky doll. It's a little doll that my grandfather had. And I use this as a surrogate. I call your energy body onto this doll. I measure your same 7 energy centers that I would do if you were in front of me. I lift out, pull out, release the heaviness, all the fear. I replace it with light. I do my rituals, my ceremony, my cleansing, and my burning my sage and my Palo Santos and my rattle a little bit, and then I send your energy body back to you in New Jersey or wherever you are. And so I did this with my dad, but I was living next door to him at the time. So I did my remote work for him next door. So he went to the doctor and they saw a spot in his lung. And the spot in his lung, he was very concerned about that. And I had told him that he was that things were okay, just intuitively. And he's like, yeah, but the doctor told me there's a spot in my lung on the x-ray and I have to go back and have the x-ray redone because they're concerned about it. What does that mean? I don't know, Dad, but if you want to give me permission to do a remote session, let me see what I see. I don't know. So I go in there and I do see this, it shows to me like a dark, heavy spot, in people's energy body. And so I just kind of pull it out and replace it with light. I don't negotiate with it. I don't ask where it came from or why it's there. Who cares, right? Just get rid of it. And so he goes back and he gets the x-ray redone and he's waiting anxiously for the results of this x-ray. And then 2 days later, the doctor calls and says, there's no spot left in your lung. What'd you do? What happened? And I'm like, Dad, look, I don't know. Sometimes these things happen. No spot, nothing, no fear. See you next year, when it was a big deal 2 weeks ago. There's no clear-cut explanation to some of these things. It's a gift, it really is a gift. And I've never, ever had somebody that hasn't had some physical or emotional shift with this shamanistic energy work. Because all of a sudden, think about this, if you're vibrating with a lot of heavy energy over a lifetime, it's almost as like you're driving your car and your car and your windshield is so dirty that you can kind of see where you're going, but you can't see where you're going, And then all of a sudden somebody comes and they clear your windshield for you. How, you drive a car, how amazing is it when your windshield is clean, when it's, dirty, and all of a sudden you're like, Eureka, I can see. Clearing out heavy energy for people gives them clarity. it allows them to make better choices in their life. It allows them to look at it from a different perspective. What you were saying, you have an experience like that, and all of a sudden the stuff that you thought was a big deal isn't so much a big deal anymore, I mean, it is a big deal, we have to deal with it, but it's not overwhelming you. So that's what this energy work from a shamanistic perspective is about. Taking it a step further, and this is really, really fascinating, when people have done their own work, or I've worked with them over time, sometimes God, Spirit, the universe gives me the heads up and says, there's something else going on here. And then we'll have a conversation, and there's just somebody that's in their crawl space. Somebody's driving them crazy in their life. And it's somebody that's been driving them crazy their whole life. Maybe their mother or their father or, something. And I get glimpses in my head, almost like a movie picture, of a past life, of something that didn't get resolved with that person, or the reason why they're sick now. And so if that person has the courage to want to do some exploring, I will explore and find out what the past life was that didn't get resolved, an energy that got carried over into your cell memory, right? We're immortal souls, our cell memory vibrates with all these things. And I will bring back that information for them. And this amazing thing happens when you understand something. It's a two-step process. It's cognitive because you understand something in a way that you never understood it before. And it's also spiritual or energetic or shamanistic because there's an energetic piece that brings healing. And so I do past life work with people too. That's fascinating. I do death rites with people that are dying or that have died to help to assist them to cross over. It's an amazing, amazing work. I really don't talk with people about what I do because, I'm never looking for business. People will come, they come and don't even advertise. But me, what I do is so sacred that I will only talk with people that want to know what that's about. So I can sit just like you are, at a baseball game and have a conversation about nothing with people and be perfectly fine with it. I'm not on all the time, but when my kids were younger, when they were in high school, their friends would be like, can you see what we did last night? I'm like, dude, I can't see what you did, and I want to know what you did last night. I'm not psychic. I can't see those kinds of things. But I can tell that you're vibrating with a lot of heavy energy. What's going on in your life right now? I can see that. But I feel like I'm put on this earth to help people when they show up. And if they show up and they don't have all three of the intention, the gratitude, and the forgiveness, but they're willing to have a conversation about it, then bingo, who am I to judge? Help anybody, work with anybody. But what's most important is that I like to share this information because I was in public education for almost 25 years. We don't teach kids about energy and emotions and how to manage them. That's a travesty. I know that this sounds like a little woo-woo out there, but honestly, when I was a social worker and when I was a director of special ed, I would find 100 little ways to interweave this into the work that I did. I would sit in a meeting with parents and I would shift energy in that meeting just because I could see the woundedness of these people that were in front of me. So my message to you is whatever you do on this planet, I don't care if you're the CEO or if you're the janitor, whatever you do, you have to find that way, that path, that will release the fears and the heaviness that you carry with you. Because not only do you carry your own stuff, but you carry your ancestral energy imprints with you. You know that quote from the Bible, the sins of the father are passed down 7 generations? They're talking about energy imprints. Not only have you inherited your family's biology or their DNA, but you've inherited their energetic patterns. When people say to me, I don't know why I keep doing what I'm doing, because I don't want to do this, ding, ding, ding. There's a family imprint there. And if you shook your family tree, maybe not like what, you can see your parents and grandparents, but your family tree goes way beyond that. If you shook that family tree, you would find falling out of that tree a very similar story to what you're dealing with energetically in your life right now. Why? Because they get passed on. And unless somebody has the courage to lift and hold the flag and say, I want this to end, it's gonna keep perpetuating itself over and over again. And so the beautiful thing that I do, and I will leave you with this thought because it's always the most, this is the gold star, this is the meat of what I do. When I work with somebody and I take them outside of ordinary time in that sort of meditative state that we talked about, we'll talk a little about meditation afterwards too. Remember I said everything's happening at the same time when you're outside of ordinary time? Expand your mind a little. I know this is mind-blowing, but when I take somebody outside of ordinary time where everything's happening at the same time, not only am I healing your energy, you don't mind that I use you, not only am I healing your energy body, your chakra system, but because it's outside of ordinary time, I'm healing your ancestors and your children's children that haven't come yet. I am shifting those family energetic patterns, habits, addictions, blah, 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 that your ancestors dealt with, that you carry, that if you don't heal them, are going to go down to your children's children. And why? Because your children's children are your ancestors. We keep coming around over and over again. Souls just keep coming back to learn the lesson. Why not get it in this lifetime? So that to me is the most amazing thing, because not only does it affect the present time, but in essence affects past and future. Because there's no time outside of this. That's amazing. That is really mind-boggling. Whenever I do this, I'm like, I do this, and I'm like, that was really cool. That was really, really cool. I mean, seriously, I'm like in the candy store when I do this sometimes. Questions? I know I threw a lot of information at you, but you know, I hope that it inspires you. Yes?
I'm in middle school, I'm in 6th grade, and what I find to be extremely surprising is in elementary school, middle school, and in high school, you're not actually allowed to bring up your beliefs. Mm-hmm. If you bring up your beliefs, the teacher will stop you, you'll get in trouble. Mm-hmm. I thought that we weren't supposed to try and persuade people, but even if you try and even talk about it, you get in trouble. Mm-hmm. And it affected me a lot because in kindergarten, people would ask me, do you believe in God? Mm-hmm. And I would get very confused because I would be like, well, what is that? Mm-hmm. And I would picture a man with a very long beard who has magic powers, and when he points at things, they appear. Mm-hmm. And when he wants people to come to him to heaven, he would just go, you come. So I was like,
don't forget he sits on a big throne too.
Yeah, I was like, I was picturing the wrong thing, and I don't personally believe that there's a being, but I at this point I think I believe that there's a higher power. But during elementary school, it's very hard for even with me, I was very confused in elementary school because I wasn't learning about this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know anything about it. Mm-hmm. So when I was trying to understand what some of my feelings were, what other people's feelings were, I wasn't able to. Mm-hmm. Because all these other kids weren't actually allowed to talk to it. Mm-hmm. So it becomes this big problem because then all these kids are confused and they don't know what to believe in because they can't talk to other people about it. Yeah. So eventually I came to this church where there are many different people with many different religious beliefs, and I figured out I'm still confused, but I figured out.
Me too, I'm confused some days too, so you're in good company.
But I felt a little bit I kind of feel like there's a little bit of a power above me, but I'm very surprised that we're just not even allowed to talk to it.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? Every society has rules, and every structure, organization has their rules. The key is that not to be bound by those rules. You know, you have to play the game with the rules and where you are. But that's why you come to church or Sunday school or CCD or those programs, you know. And to the credit of the parents that commit the time. I know everybody's competing for time with sports and activities and whatnot, but you're right. But here's the other thing. You're also at a stage where you should be confused. There's a lot of information out there. But here's the other piece of this. If you asked anybody in this room right now, they would love to have heard what I just said when they were your age. Right? Right? People say this to me all the time. Oh my God, if I only knew that then. If I was only aware of this stuff now. So consider yourself a very special soul, that you are not only a part of this community that has exposed you to so much diversity, but you also heard another aspect of it today. So find a place in your heart to put that, and know that at the right time, the right place, you can have a conversation with the right people about it. And the rest of the stuff just doesn't matter. Yeah.
And I just have to bring up one thing. My church, we include everybody, gays, transgender, and a lot of the times I'm brought up in a place every week where I come and everybody's extremely open-minded, and I accept everybody. And then when I go to school, it's very hard because a lot of these people, they don't even know what it is. And even with the things like that, you're also not allowed to talk about that. When you see someone like that, in my school, we have only a couple of them. People kind of exclude them because since you're not allowed to talk about it, they don't know what's going on.
Well, here's the other piece of it too. We can't judge people. Who are we to judge? And I'm going to turn the tables a little bit because the fact that you belong to a school that restricts you where kids don't see it your way is you're judging them a little bit too. So the lesson here is that door swings both ways. They may not see your point of view, and you clearly don't see their point of view, but there's no wrong or right, but who are we to judge? Again, your friends might be just preschoolers in spirit school, but you might have a really good friend that's college level in spirit school that gets this. But it's about respecting everybody's opinions and decisions, even if you don't believe in that or agree with that, and living peacefully within yourself. We say in this tradition, we say that you cannot go to the mountains, you can't go to an underground bunker, you can't go to an island. There's no safe place that you can go to. You can only create a safe place inside yourself. And that's what I'm saying. Create a safe place inside yourself so that you are this island of peace, and people, you don't have to say anything. People can just feel the energy of peace that comes off you by being in that neutral, non-judgmental place. It's hard to do that. We live in a world where everything's polarized. You have to make a choice. I don't know, I live in a place of neutrality and I'm probably the most peaceful person I know. Be okay with that. Any other questions? Because it's 4 o'clock and I want to honor that time.
I have a suggestion. If it's okay with everybody here, I'm just pondering it because I have some kind of responsibility here. What if we put a few of these tables together and you join, and we're not that big a group, so we would just basically be all sitting around the tables and take a snack, and we can all take a snack. We'll put the tables around so that we're all basically sitting together, and we can continue a conversation with Eileen. How does that work?
I'll just ask this question first. I have a question. You say that we inherit the energy. We inherit the energy from our ancestors. Do you believe in reincarnation in the sense that some of us also inherit the bodies of their ancestors?
Yes.
So you think that the souls is circulating and you can be born into the same body again? A similar body?
No, your incarnation into a body is going to change. The souls remain timeless. We're like whale pods. We travel in groups together. So souls that are connected in love tend to travel together. But here's the thing. In one lifetime, you might show up as a different race or a different sex, a different gender, a different, religious belief. Because you got to learn from all different perspectives. And I say this a lot. If you discriminate against people, that's the best way to find yourself in the next lifetime back in that group. Because you need to learn to know, your soul, what it's like to be discriminated against. So be careful, about who your enemies are, because you're going to become one of them in the next lifetime. Yeah, but not the same body. It's. Thank you.